Welcome to the Colts Squad Show. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. And wait a minute, there are 51 other guys on this roster besides Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson?
And I'm Zach Hicks. I'm part of the spin crew in the media that's here to victimize poor Chris Ballard.
Hi, I'm Alan Pinkett. And is it a wrap at 53, or are they going to bring in more people?
Colts Nation, rise up. It's the Colts Squad, sponsored by Gametime. Everything Indianapolis Colts every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Circle City, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. It's time to squad up. The Colts Squad Show starts now.
Hope you're having a great week. Thanks so much for tuning us in to another edition of the Colts Squad Show here on the Locked On Colts Network. I'm Derek Schultz. I've been a sports talker in Indianapolis for probably too long. At least my wife thinks that. I'm joined by Notre Dame legend and longtime NFL running back Alan Pinkett, and you everydayers, of course, know Zach Hicks, one half of our dynamic Locked On Colts duo. Jake Arthur is out today. He is on assignment. He's not really on assignment. I just like saying that because it makes him sound more esteemed and privileged and all that. Guys, we got a ton to talk about today. Usually in the middle of the week, there's no game, right? This week, we're still waiting for the season to start, but Chris Ballard had his press conference today, his first public appearance since the quarterback decision, and a lot of the press conference had to do with the quarterback decision. So we're going to talk about and give our reaction to Chris Ballard's press conference from earlier today at West 56th Street. Of course, the Colts now have their 53-man roster, at least where it sits today. There could be some more changes coming. There's already been some more changes since the cut-down day yesterday. Most surprising cut and keep, and why the Colts have signified that they are out of patience, certainly with the roster. That's how it looks. Also, how this roster stacks up in the AFC, we'll lean on Zach for his opinion there. But there was a recent publication that came out that had the Colts bottom 10 in the NFL, bottom third, I guess I should say, in the NFL as far as roster strength is concerned. And our position group preview continues. We will hit the running backs, I think an intriguing room at the very least, and maybe we have a little bit more certainty of what we're going to get there as opposed to some of the other positions on the field. But guys, Chris Ballard and the press conference today and everything that he had to say, I know it drew a lot of reactions, particularly what he had to say about Anthony Richardson. And let's kind of start there, because so much of it was about the quarterback decision and really so little of it had to necessarily do with Daniel Jones, even though he did make an interesting player comparison that I want to talk about coming up here. But Zach, he said what I think we expected him to say, right? We're not giving up on Anthony Richardson. We're not trading Anthony Richardson. We didn't expect otherwise as far as that was concerned. I do think what was interesting is to hear him sort of hash out this plan of it being more beneficial now for him to be back on the sidelines again, which I think is a little bit of a curveball for a lot of people that have been watching the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, I had a friend tell me earlier today that it's like putting the toothpaste back in, after having it out. Like, the thing is, if this were the plan from the very beginning, if from day one the plan was Richardson competing with a competent player like Daniel Jones, and a player like Jones beats him out and say, hey, Richardson's 21 years old, he's going to sit and learn, that's perfectly fine. Like, I don't think anybody would have complained if they did that with Gardner Minshew, for instance, in 2023, or it didn't have to be Gardner Minshew. It could have been any other quarterback they could have had in that situation. And if he lost that quarterback battle, and we're talking about this and back then, perfectly fine. But like the comparison was, you can't just restart this thing. You do have a couple more years of control on Anthony Richardson, but your guys' backs are against the wall this year. You have to win this year to even keep your job. And also, like, you can say that it's about maturity for Richardson, like growing up, and not that he's immature, but like this could be a good learning thing for him. But once you give someone something and you just rip it out of their hand and take it away, regardless if it's earned or not earned, taking it away from him, that's very, very different than coming in from day one and saying like, hey, you're going to sit and learn. This is, hey, we thought you were good enough at one point, and now we don't think you're good enough. And that is a difficult thing to adjust to. So I do agree with Chris Ballard where, this is a thing for Anthony Richardson to sit and learn and really develop behind the scenes. But I don't think that you can just restart this thing with Indianapolis. This isn't going to be a thing where, in 2 years' time after sitting, like he's going to emerge as this quarterback for the Colts. We don't ever really see that happen. And Chris even had a question asked to him today, like, how many times can you look at other teams and say, like, a quarterback benched twice with his own team can come back and start for that team? And he said, well, even if it's never happened, then there's always that one. And why can't he be the one? We're talking about an extreme outlier then. Like, he was already an extreme outlier from everything with his college to his NFL and from the accuracy concerns. And now you want to bank on him as being the only one to do something in NFL history. Like, look, you can't come out and say it because he's a guy on your team. You don't want to alienate a player on your team. And there is still this slim chance that somehow this works out because he is part of the roster. But let's be honest here. We're talking about the most extreme of extreme outliers of a guy coming back from being benched twice with his already outlier status. And we shouldn't be kidding ourselves this. So, yeah, I don't think anything that he was going to say about the quarterback situation was going to change anything today. I guess it was just like the way he said everything was a little bit abrasive and kind of what the more discussion point is here.
Well, I'll say this. Most GMs are not humble people. They find it hard to admit they made a mistake. So they have to spin it a certain way. And, I wouldn't expect him to be humble because they got to make some really tough decisions. So the spin is he's going to learn, being on the bench and taking mental reps, and hopefully he can progress that way. When, yes, Zach, you talked about him being benched twice. I mean, that's enough right there to let you know what's going to happen. But I think that they can't admit a mistake because it looks bad on Ballard well, they're not going to cut him. They couldn't cut him because that would be really a huge mistake on the part of management to waste a pick on a guy that you cut in year 3. So they're going to keep riding that horse and hopefully see some improvement. And I mean, it's set up nice because Daniel Jones just has a 1-year contract, and in all likelihood, Anthony Richardson has 2 remaining, and so he can sort of keep that unless Daniel Jones just blows it out of the water this year and gets an extension, but he's not going to admit it's a mistake, and maybe it's too early to say it's a mistake. Maybe sitting behind Daniel Jones will be the right medicine for him to understand, the mistakes he made and the way he should play and how the offense should be run. But we won't know until he gets in again.
Yeah, by the time they're ready to admit that it's a mistake, they might all be out of jobs, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't think they're ever going to, we have seen Chris Ballard fall on the sword before in press conferences and admit mistakes. He was not ready to fall on the sword today, Zach.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to note with all this is, a lot of people saying that, like, again, maybe there's an avenue for this work. Maybe the sitting helps him. We can say that about every single player in the NFL. Maybe Jonathan Edwards, who's the 52nd, 53rd player on the roster right now, maybe he just becomes Darrelle Revis. Maybe that does happen. And, I'm not trying to be a snarky punk right here, I promise, guys. But there's always a chance for everything in the NFL. There's a wide range of expectations and possibilities for everything, but there's also a realistic range for this stuff. And realistically, a quarterback going into year 3, getting benched twice with already his background that we have in the NFL, it's very unlikely that it's going to happen. We haven't seen it happen. If it does happen, it'll probably happen somewhere else. So sure, you always have to keep the door slightly open just for the chance that this thing can still work. But at the end of the day, I just don't think that this is going to work. And I think the Colts know that too. They're not banking on this thing working right now. They're moving forward with Daniel Jones, hoping Daniel Jones can get them in a good situation to reevaluate again after the year. And they're going to go from there. So, right. Yes, there is a chance that this could certainly work. And I won't use the Jonathan Edwards thing again because everything positive about Jonathan Edwards going forward. But it's a very unlikely thing. And it's hard to, he kept saying these first time in forever type things or first time ever things in this. And I don't want to live with a decision maker banking on impossibles or near impossibles to happen, because that's not sound decision making,
Yeah. And, Alan, the actions speak louder than words. And what the Colts actions have shown during this process don't line up with the words that they're ready to be patient and they're doing all this. I think Chris Ballard made a comment. Well, you guys saw Daniel Jones in camp, so Yeah, we all did see Daniel Jones in camp, and we didn't think really anything of it. We didn't think it was that great. So what are we missing here? And just the fact that this is year 3 and he's still not ready to be your starter, and this kind of journeyman, mediocre to middling veteran is the guy that you go with. To me, Alan, that tells me all that I need to know. The Colts don't need to say it. They've already shown me how they feel about where they are with Anthony Richardson right now.
Well, number one, they never declared Anthony Richardson as a clear starter. They said it was going to be an even competition. They got the equal number of reps all the time. They had a plan going into preseason where AR was going to play the first game, and then the second game, Daniel Jones was going to play that. But I think his fate was sealed when he missed that blitz against the Ravens. Yeah. And I think the coaches at that point were just, look, we've had enough with this. This is basic stuff. This is stuff you pick up in high school, scat protection. Guys coming free, you should be looking at that dude and getting the ball out of your hands. So I think that they were just fed up with, the mechanics thing and the poor decision making. And in year 3, probably lost patience with the fact that these are things that should be secondhand to a quarterback in their third year. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. What are you going to do is right. I wanted to hop into the comments here because a lot of other people that maybe had the chance. I don't know how many people want us to declare that they were watching a 1 p.m. press conference today because maybe they were supposed to be working. But I snuck in too because I had to see it. Frank said, I've never seen Ballard look so defensive. Secret Squirrel brings up a good point. You can tell Ballard is feeling the pressure, even if he doesn't want to admit it. The body language speaks volumes. I did feel like, Zach, you've seen a lot of these too. The body language did feel, I don't want to get too psychoanalysis here. He felt less comfortable up there. He is always in control of the room. I'll give Chris Ballard credit. He controls the room. And there's a reason why he endeared himself so much to the media and fans here early on, because he can do that. He has that sort of power. And this one, it did feel like he was pretty he was ready to rumble, if you will, from the get-go of that. And I get some of it. He wants to give his actual starting quarterback, Daniel Jones, some credit. And he wants to also talk about the rest of this roster, which I promise we're going to do a little bit later on in the show. But this was different from what I've seen really ever from him in 8.5 years of press conferences with Chris Ballard.
Yeah, and I don't mind a GM having some bite to them. I mean, to go to what Alan said, general managers should be arrogant. You're in a very tough job where you have to kind of lack empathy in a lot of situations. You have to cut guys who have done nothing wrong but are just not the best option for your team. You have to bench a quarterback you took I guess he didn't really directly do the benching, but you have to be coinciding with the head coach's decision to bench the quarterback you basically rested your job on, taking him in the top 5. So you have to lack that empathy. You have to be arrogant. You have to have some bite to you, and I totally get it. But to have this kind of fighting mentality when you're getting all these questions about quarterback, what did you think the press conference was going to be about? It's your first time talking since your guy you took 4th overall a couple years ago has been put on the bench for Daniel Jones, who, I mean, look, if we're talking about how bad Richardson's been the last couple of years, Jones is right there with him the last 2 years. And Jones is older, so there were a lot of good questions about that, I thought, today. I thought Stephen Holder and James Boyd asked some really great questions. And what we really got out of Ballard was this really combative mentality there. I thought the most valuable answer he gave, though, was when James asked, I think, one of the best questions of the entire press conference, saying, why should we believe in your plan at this point when your plan has changed so much from we need to get him on the field and get him experience to now he's going to learn better sitting and watching. And Chris said, the only way that we can really get people to believe is by winning. And ultimately, I completely agree there. That is the only thing that'll change all of this. Win games this year. He's in year 9. His teams have made the playoffs in 2 seasons of his 9 years with the Colts. The only thing that changes any of this is win. Because if this were a highly decorated general manager with multiple playoff wins and a Super Bowl win or something, he could get up there and say anything. And everybody would be at the floor, all hailing Chris Ballard. But because there has been losing, because he keeps getting chance after chance to rectify this, my analogy before the podcast started here was like, look, I don't need to be a plumber to tell you that my sink is leaking. And if my sink has been leaking for 9 years when you've been working on it, then maybe I should get a new plumber in here. I want the guy who can actually fix this thing. So at the end of the day, like, winning will cure this. And Alan has said it a couple times on here, winning cures all. And that's the most poignant thing that Chris Ballard said today. It's like, the only way I can get people to believe is if we win this year, and they got to win this year.
Well, I think there's a very subtle animosity when it comes to general managers and the media. And general managers do not like being questioned, when they make a decision. And so when he made this decision, over a week ago, I'm sure he felt like it's final. I've made my decision. We've stated our case. So to be questioned by it now, I'm sure it just took him back a little bit, because I already made my decision. Why are you guys, going over something that happened a week ago? But a lot of people, it's a good question to ask. I think the questions were good because it's sometimes not believable that you would draft a guy number 4 and throw him out to the wolves, then all of a sudden change course and say, well, we want him to sit behind a more experienced player and let him learn that way. So I'm sure that a lot of members of the media are baffled by that, because who else does that?
Yeah, and the fact about sitting, well, God, guys, he sat basically his entire rookie year, and he sat for a chunk of last year. I mean, how much sitting does this guy need?
A lot of his college career too. He sat.
Yeah,
he started 1 year in college.
How much sitting does he need? We had somebody say in the comments, well, why not approach this like this is his rookie year in 2 years? Like, guys, the NFL doesn't work that way.
No.
It doesn't work that way. You have to show something here soon. And what we've been saying on this show is we're not necessarily writing off Anthony Richardson's future. Maybe he is Alex Smith and he goes somewhere else and he plays, or Geno Smith, or any of these other guys, Baker, any of these other guys that have had new life, but they all had new life with different teams. And that's where it feels like is the most likely outcome for Anthony Richardson with where we sit today. But when we come back, we'll talk about the other 51 guys on this roster. In fact, we'll talk about 54, 55, 56, 57. We'll talk about some of the surprising cuts and keeps and tell you why the Colts personnel decisions reveal everything about how the front office and coaching staff views this season. That's next on the Colts Squad Show. Stick around. This portion of the show brought to you by our friends at Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and the entire Colts Squad Show are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too. Whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. The trash talk's already begun in my league with about a dozen old college buddies. We got some IU, Purdue guys that are in there, and we're spread out all over the country. So we don't get to do the live draft as a group together anymore, but the camaraderie and ribbing, even online, is still there after almost 20 years. And in fact, to celebrate 28 years, that's how long Yahoo Fantasy Football has been around. 28 years of greatness. Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season right around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. And if you're more into the classics, you can always play in the head-to-head private leagues or join a public league as well. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoo.com/LockedOnNFL. And we're back on the Colts Squad Show alongside Notre Dame and Houston Oilers running back Alan Pinkett and Zach Hicks, co-host of Locked On Colts. I'm Derek Schultz. Thanks so much for joining us. So the Colts did make some, I wouldn't say necessarily shocking cuts with the 53-man roster. I think some guys like Jelani Woods, we saw early on that the writing was kind of on the wall of where they sat with him and some of these other players. But I think there were some surprises there. I'll actually start with mine, guys, and I kind of want us to go around the room and each sort of give one here. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised because I know he's not a scheme fit, Zach. And again, he battled health issues this offseason. And I'm just disappointed. I really root for the Indy guys, and it's so rare that the Colts have an Indy guy on the roster. In Juju Brents, Warren kid, East Side kid, really nice, well put together guy, sharp guy, easy to like, fun to talk to. Not that matters when you're a professional football player. You got to be out there, you got to be healthy, and you got to be able to perform. But he has a lot of the attributes and measurables that you would like, I feel like, in a defensive back. So I hope he's healthy and successful elsewhere, but unfortunately that's not going to be here.
Yeah, the Juju Brent story is kind of unfortunate. And to kind of go what Alan said in the first segment, like GMs are arrogant, and they don't like cutting guys that they just took 2 years ago. I mean, he was drafted 2 years ago from the team. This would have been his third year. And because of all the injuries, because of the scheme change on defense, he just kind of became the odd man out. Like I really thought coming into this offseason that he needed to have a great camp to make a case to the Lou Anarumo, Chris Hewitt, and Jerome Henderson to, hey, keep me around. I can still be this guy for you. And then when he went down with that hamstring injury and he missed over a month of play, the writing was certainly on the wall that a change could come. I didn't think they were ultimately going to do it because Justin Wally got hurt and they just needed bodies at corner. But Jonathan Edwards playing well and then going out and trading for Mekhi Blackman kind of changed the numbers game at corner. And it led to Juju Brents being a guy that was waived. So it's very unfortunate that it didn't work out here. He only appeared in 11 of 34 possible games through 2 seasons. And kind of like what we've been saying about Anthony Richardson here, it's like, look, the NFL stands for not for long. If you're not producing, if you're not showing something, and the coaching is just not in your corner anymore, you only get so long. And I think with Gus Bradley and his entire defense of system just out the window, and now Lou Anarumo and his new guys coming in, they didn't have any ties to Juju Brents. So ultimately, when it came down to Anarumo going into Chris Ballard's office, it was like, look, this guy just hasn't played this offseason, and we can go get Xavier Howard, who is a Pro Bowl corner for me. We can go trade for this guy from the Vikings, so I have some high hopes on. Jonathan Edwards has been my first-team corner for most of camp, and I think he's got something. And those were the guys that won out at the end. So, I don't fault the Colts for cutting him. It is a surprise, though, because, again, they took him with like a top 40 pick, top 45 pick in that draft. But you got to stay healthy in this league. You got to get lucky and get on the field and make some plays. And if you have a scheme change like that on defense, that could be the end of the road for anyone because those coaches don't have any ties to you.
Agree with you there. Coaches and management are always looking for a return on their investment. And I'll also say this. We used to say it when I played, can't make the club in the tub. If you injure too much, they look at you differently. They view you differently. And I think you hit the nail on the head. New DC, new system. No ties to this guy. I don't know if he can run my system or not. I'd rather go out and get somebody off the street who knows my system. So it can be mean that way in terms of you think that you're not necessarily entitled to try and prove your worth, but you only have a few opportunities, and if you're hurt most of the time, then you're gonna have that moniker. It's like wearing the scarlet letter. That person's always hurt. I can't count on him, so they're gonna find somebody else, and that's why the NFL stands for not for long.
Surprising keep wise, I was originally surprised they kept both Tim Smith and Eric Johnson because it was 11 defensive linemen, which felt like a lot, but you felt like one of those guys was 53, right? Maybe it was 53 and 54 right there. And then, of course, that ended up happening when they dumped Tim Smith for Chad Muma off of waivers, the linebacker from Jacksonville. But I'm surprised, Zach, that they decided to choose Johnson over Smith. Generally speaking, you take the young guy, the draft pick, right? But I think it shows, cutting Juju Brents and leaning towards vets. They're bringing in a bunch of guys with experience at corner and, even Isaiah Land, they're just not waiting around right now. Like you can tell with this coaching staff and with the personnel moves of this front office that I think they understand what's at stake for them this season.
Yeah, I will say if anyone didn't think that the pressure was on this year when it came to starting Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson, I think all their moves since then have kind of said that they feel the need to win like right now. I mean, we are making moves that help us winning now. And I'm not going to say sacrificing the future for it because, look, I love Juju Brents' potential, but ultimately there was a reason why he was cut. It made sense. But when it comes to some of the moves they made, like Tim Smith, ideally you would rather keep Tim Smith over Eric Johnson. But I will say Eric Johnson had a better offseason than Tim Smith. It's just, it was close enough to where typically you go with the younger player, the cheaper player, the thing that Alan and I always talk about, the non-vested vet there. So you don't have to give him benefits and all that. But they want to win now. So they're getting an Eric Johnson back on the roster. They're working out Anthony Walker, working out Mike Hilton. They have Xavier Howard coming back in. Like they are not messing around. And this is the oldest roster that Chris Ballard has ever had in Indianapolis. I saw right after the first cuts, their average age was 26.2. And I think that's the oldest. That's the only time they've been above the age of 26 average down the roster. And that's without potentially signing Walker, Hilton, or other players. And I think they technically got older by cutting Tim Smith for Chad Muma. So it might be like 26.3 now. So yeah, they are making some of those win now moves. And one guy that I want to shout this guy out because I talked about him in the first segment for a second, but it is shocking with all that, though, that Jonathan Edwards is still in the team, right? Like Jonathan Edwards, undrafted free agent out of Tulane. It just shows how good of an offseason he had. And I watched his last game against the Bengals, and I was really impressed and just really happy. I love undrafted stories. It's like my favorite part of covering the NFL. So seeing a guy like that come in here after, being an Indiana State guy. He went to Indiana State for 4 years, goes up to Tulane, plays 1 year at corner at Tulane, comes to the NFL, and now he's good enough to crack a 53. That's all for a win now team. Again, they're bringing in all these guys, the over the hill gang right now to play for the team. And this 23-year-old corner that started at Indiana State is good enough to make that. Like, I think that shows that it really proves like we didn't care about your background. We didn't care about anything. Just come in here and perform and you're going to stick because we need to win games right now. And they're saying to everyone, like, look, this guy performed well enough to make the team.
Well, I think that with veterans, you have a certain expectation with them. They know the rigors of an NFL season. They understand that one mistake and they can be gone. Where when you have a rookie, you're willing to tolerate some mistakes because it's all new to them. In fact, rookies hit a wall at some point because in college, they've only played, 11, 12 games? Well, in the NFL, you still got 5 more games. You still got another month to play. Yeah, but rookies will hit that wall sometimes. So when you have experience and you have vets, you have people that understand what the pro game is, and they know how to take care of their body, or should know how to take care of their body to make sure they are able to play all 17 games. And mentally, vets understand not just the business of pro football, but the mindset you have to have, where with a rookie, it's still all new. They're going into new stadiums. They may be all excited about looking up in the stands and seeing the stadium and thinking about, the fact that, wow, you just see the stadium on TV. Now I'm playing in it. A vet, they've already seen the stadium. They got a job to do on the field. So yes, it does look like this turn towards more veterans is a we need to win now move.
And when you mentioned that difference between the rookies and vets, and look, I'm not trying to downplay any of the guys that were UDFAs or whatever else that are 23 years old that got cut. It sucks, right? It's you're fighting for a job, even if you know it's coming. It sucks. But I especially feel for Chris Ballard made a point of it to call out Laquan Treadwell and talk about how much he liked Laquan. And this is a guy who's been in the league 10 years, former first round pick, but ever since he washed out with Minnesota, he's been on 8 teams, I think. And he just, he keeps going, he keeps fighting and just trying to find that role. I know you went through it as well, getting cut. What is that experience like, particularly for a veteran player, when you've already somewhat been there, done that, and then you realize, oh, wait, they don't want me anymore?
Well, I did 8 training camps, made the roster 7 times, got cut on the 8th one, but that's the one that stands out the most. In fact, sometimes I think I've been in a state of depression since 1993 because there is nothing that has been more consuming or more fulfilling than playing that game of football and running at rock and being in the huddle with those guys. And football is just such a game of routine. what you do on Tuesday, what you do on Thursday. It's such a routine, and you get used to doing that. You don't think about it, you just do it. Then all of a sudden, it just stops. It's over with now. But I'm not saying feel sorry for those guys that got cut, because if they played in college, they already beat the odds. All right. Yeah. And I also look at the fact that this is the elite of the elite. I looked it up. It used to be like 500 guys would go to the combine. All right. But this year, I think it was 329 guys were invited to the combine. Out of that, 257 guys got drafted. And out of that number, a quarter of those will make a roster. So you got a less than 1% chance to make it on an NFL roster. Like I said, don't feel sorry for them. Those guys should feel proud that they at least got the opportunity to go inside the Colts locker room and wear the jersey for a little bit. But on the other hand, you can't really give it up yet either, because one thing that happens in the NFL is dudes get hurt. And I remember after I got cut, like 2 weeks later, Miami called, and I had to go down to Miami and try out for them. It didn't work out. And then in December, I got called to Pittsburgh because they had some issues with the running back. He didn't know if he wanted to play or not. He ended up wanting to play. So you have to stay in shape, and unfortunately, hope that somebody gets hurt so that you can get a job to continue to play the game that you love. But at some point, you have to figure out that I can't do this anymore. When I was with the Oilers, we had guys for 2 and 3 years in a row. They were perennial camp guys. And I'm like, dude, don't you know they're just using you so they can have an extra body? You're going to get cut. You're just going to spend a month and a half here and get cut. At some point, you got to realize that, okay, the game has passed you by. And I remember when it passed me by, there was one day when I used to go weightlift, and then I'd go hit some golf balls. And there was this one day when I only had time to do one. I went and hit golf balls, and that was my signal to myself. Okay, I'm done playing. I'm done. So it sucks getting cut. Because you have dreams of playing in the NFL, and because you're cut now doesn't mean that dream is over. You still have to keep pressing on and hoping that you get on. But in all likelihood, because it's a numbers game, very, very few people playing NFL might have to start looking for something else to do.
Yeah. But you always got to, wait. You never know when that call is going to come. Kenny Moore with the Patriots, they really liked him. He had a good offseason. There was no room at the end. And then, their loss was another team's gain. I think probably the most famous, like UDFA type story. I think Jeff Saturday was working in like a hardware store after getting cut by the Ravens, and the Colts called one day and they're like, hey, you want to come in and try? And, that guy was a borderline Hall of Fame player, Ring of Honor guy for the Colts as well. So the guys today, the guys yesterday getting let go, for a lot of them, it's over, right? But not for everybody. And that's kind of the beauty of the NFL. When looking at this roster, which is not yet complete, how does it stack up against the rest of the AFC? A recent ranking had the Colts near the bottom of the NFL. We'll take a deep dive with the squad when the show returns next. This portion of the show brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Don't know what to play? Check out FanDuel's daily promotions and dip your toe in. The app always makes it fun with new wagers to play in games that you might not have previously been watching. Like maybe there's a Yankees-Nationals game. You're like, why would I watch this? Well, FanDuel makes it part of the action. Put a little action on it, and then you want to be part of the action. That's because FanDuel makes you feel a part of it anytime that you're part of FanDuel. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's betting $5, getting $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins if you are a new customer to FanDuel. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. And we're back on the Colts Squad Show. Thanks so much for joining us. Alongside Alan Pinkin and Zach Hicks, I'm Derek Schultz. Jake Arthur will rejoin us for Sunday's show, and that's going to be the cadence. If you guys didn't already know, we're going to do a Wednesday night show at 9 o'clock. The live stream, you can catch up on it afterwards as well. That'll be in season 2. And then Sundays following Colts games, we will then do a recap show. And I understand they have a Monday night game, so we'll adjust accordingly. Anytime there's a Colts game, we want you to come back here to the Colts Squad Show on the Locked On Colts Network to watch the game afterwards and hear the reaction afterwards, I should say. Just to kind of tie a bow, before we get into the actual roster itself, Zach, are you expecting, they brought in Muma today at linebacker, but it sounded like you were kind of on him as far as at least being a guy that was anything more than a special teamer. But are we going to see more roster moves at linebacker? Maybe that offensive line depth doesn't feel like it's complete to me, but anywhere else that sticks out to you on this roster?
Yeah, I think we'll see some more veterans get cycled in here. Again, the beauty with the practice squad now, post-COVID, probably the best thing to come out of COVID was the fact that they expanded practice squads to have veterans on there now. So teams can put players like Chris Lamons, for instance, on that practice squad where, look, this guy's good enough to be on an NFL roster, but because he has that familiarity with the Colts, he doesn't want to go elsewhere unless he's getting like a guaranteed spot on the roster. So maybe the official 53 won't have any additions, but we could see players like Mike Hilton, Anthony Walker, guys that they're working out these next couple of days, be added to that practice squad. They could be called up the first 3 weeks without losing their practice squad eligibility. And then once injuries pile up like they always do in that first month, then they can get called up to the roster and earn that roster spot there. So I think we'll see some changes here. Linebacker for sure. I mean, Chris Ballard even said that they're still working through some things with linebacker. So I'm assuming that was a hint at the Anthony Walker workout coming up tomorrow. And I think offensive line is another category as well, where they're really looking at that last tackle spot. And maybe they view Matt Gonsalves as a potential guy they kick out the tackle in a pinch and put Dalton Tucker back at right guard. So maybe that's why they don't value that fourth tackle as big right now. They're certainly working through some things though, and I certainly think that there will be quite a few more turnovers happening with the practice squad and even the bottom of this roster in the next couple days.
Well, when you look at a 53-man roster and then go position by position, there's a certain number of people you want to have in that position. And 4 linebackers to me always seem kind of slim. Because you look at how they play, they're banging heads every single play. There's going to be injuries at the linebacker position. To only have 4 didn't make sense to me. And so I thought they were a little top heavy on the defensive line, but you got to have those dudes up front. So to me, it was more balancing out the roster. You don't want to have on your special teams all defensive backs and a couple of running backs. You need some studs, and linebackers are usually the ones that bring the wood on the special teams. So I thought that it was more bringing the numbers in balance, bringing in an additional linebacker. And I don't think they're done yet. And even though their defense is one where they've got the Mike and the Will on the field most of the time, it's still not enough to have 4. And so, like I said, I think it was just bringing the numbers more to a level that's going to be acceptable to play an NFL schedule.
Yeah, and I think you'd be more apt to get away with 4 if you had 4 starter quality linebackers, and they don't. And I think that adds to the problem. It's not just the fact that it's bodies; it's the fact that Cam McGrone. No offense to those guys. I mean, they're okay, but I don't want to be relying on those guys to be playing extensive playing time, and I think that's a little bit of a red flag too when it comes to the linebacker spot. But overall, when you look at this roster. A recent ESPN.com article had the Colts as the 25th best roster in the league, 13th in the AFC, which I'm going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. That seems overly harsh to me, even though I do think that we in the past have overrated this roster because many of its best players are still stacked at positions that just aren't as impactful. If you look at the Chris Ballard era, the best players have been an offensive guard and a running back and a slot corner. And no offense, those are all great players, but they aren't a wide receiver, an edge, and a quarterback. You'd rather have your talent or corner. You would rather have your talent stacked at those positions. I understand you have to take points away because of the quarterback situation alone, right? So that automatically probably knocks them 4 or 5 spots. But, Zach, I think you follow us probably even more than I do. When you look at this roster and then you look kind of around the NFL, where do you think that it slots in with what we know today?
Yeah, I think the ESPN ranking, was this a recent ranking or was this like a month ago, this one?
This was right before training camp started.
Yeah. Okay, so I know exactly. Yeah,
yep.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And I remember when that came out, and basically that ranking was essentially, we're going to rank the quarterbacks of the league, but we're not going to rank the roster, which I think is fair. It's fair, right? Because look who goes to the championship games every year. The Pat Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the Joe Burrows, the Lamar Jacksons, the Jalen Hurts, the Jaden Daniels last year. So I get it, right? Like the quarterback is such a massive part of this, but I think you could have maybe worded it better as an ESPN article than just putting it as like, oh, the best teams with maybe like slight changes here, but it's typically going to be the quarterbacks, And that was kind of how I interpreted that. I think a more interesting article would have been ranking the rosters aside from quarterback, just to really get the value of strength on the roster. Because I think when it comes to the Colts, I'd probably put them like middle of the road, maybe a little bit above middle of the road, like 13th, 12th, 13th, 14th in the NFL in terms of roster construction. I do like the roster a lot, especially if you look at the starters on both sides of the ball. I mean, you look on offense, you have a former first-team All-Pro running back. You have an offensive line that features a future Hall of Famer, plus a top 5 paid left tackle that's playing really good football. Some other good offensive linemen out there as well. At wide receiver, you got a guy who's hit 1,000 yards consistently, and Michael Pittman Jr. Josh Downs has been very productive for a young player. Alec Pierce, one of the best deep threats in football. You add a top 15 pick in Tyler Warren into that group. That's a pretty solid offense to put around any quarterback. And then on defense, I mean, look, you have former All-Pros on all levels of the defense. You have DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin, and Charvarius Ward. And then you're mixing in Cam Bynum, mixing in Grover Stewart, Laiatu Latu going into his second year. So I'm not saying this is like an elite Super Bowl caliber roster, but I think it's a pretty darn good roster. I think it fits a lot of what the Colts are going for with their systems on offense and defense. And I think it's one that can certainly compete, and I think it's one that has a pretty decent floor. Like we saw last year with this Colts team, that they ran an archaic defensive system that was not suited for the current NFL. They were 29th in yards allowed on defense. On offense, you were getting bottom 5 quarterback play, and they went 8-9. Like this is a roster that is a competitive roster, a roster that's been competitive for years. And aside from that 2022 disaster, we haven't really seen many awful seasons from this Colts team. So saying that this is like the 25th best team, or the Colts are going to be a 4-win team this year, like outside of just massive injuries to the trenches, which can certainly happen, I don't see this team like bottoming out this year. I think it's more likely they'll be in the playoff conversation until the final month of the season, and then we'll see if they finish stronger than what they have in the last couple of years. But I think they'll be right around that 500 mark until December, and it'll be on them just to finish and play strong in December to make that push for the playoffs.
Well, Zach, what I did when I saw that ranking was, I thought to myself, yeah, but they were 8-9 and they had some issues, So they've upgraded at tight end. All right, they've got a solid play out of the running back. They've got a very, very good receiver room, and they're going to have maybe more stability at quarterback. And so I think the ranking was clearly a reflection on their perception of what the quarterback is going to add or not add to the offense. You spoke enough about the defense. I think you made your case on the defense, but is this offense better than last year? And if you have someone that can run the system, then they should be better. So I think as a player, they get a chance to see these rankings too. They watch ESPN. So that's an opportunity for them to internalize that in the locker room. That's even one of those things. You hang it up on your locker saying, yeah, they're saying we're number 25. Wait till we kick this other team's ass. Then what are they going to rank us? So you use that as motivation. And in the NFL, you really can't sneak up on anybody. It's week in, week out. You either beat them or you get beat. So if they can, with this upgraded talent on offense, just do better than they did last year, they make the playoffs. I also look at, their stability at the other teams in the division, because the thing you have to do first is create a team that's going to win a division. The easiest way to get in the playoffs. Stability in Jacksonville, stability in Houston. And even though he's a rookie, he's the first pick, stability in Tennessee. Where when that poll was made, there was not stability. A lot of questions about Anthony Richardson, and a lot of people still doubting Daniel Jones. So I can understand how some prognosticators would, drop him down, all based on quarterback play.
Yeah, that's a good point, Alan. The fact that, maybe we shouldn't be worried as much about how it stacks up against Kansas City, Baltimore, and Buffalo. We should probably be more worried about how it stacks up against Houston, Jacksonville, and Tennessee, because really that's the first step. That's the first bridge you got to cross, right? And then that's a bridge that the Colts really haven't crossed in the Chris Ballard era very much. I do think, and what gives me confidence, I guess, guys, is that, kind of to echo what you said, definitively this is a better roster than last year, right? Yeah. So, and I'm talking just, now you get year 2 of A.D. Mitchell and year 2 of Leatu Latu, and not just the new additions or the movers and changers. And also, I think, gun to my head, there's probably not a huge difference here. I would take Daniel Jones over Joe Flacco at this point in his career as well. So I'm also kind of adding that into my evaluation of them overall, Zach.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to be real quick here. Last year at corner, they were starting an undrafted free agent on the outside coming off an Achilles tear in Dallas Flowers. And I'm not trying to throw hate at Dallas Flowers because I always bring this up. And I feel like I'm hating on Dallas Flowers, but you're going from post-Achilles tear Dallas Flowers to Charvarius Ward on the outside at corner. Like, that's such a massive upgrade. You're going from Julian Blackmon to Cam Bynum. That's a really big upgrade at safety. Like, they may change. You're going from Mo Alley Cox at tight end to Tyler Warren. Like, and everyone else is coming back. Like, so you didn't really lose anything. Oh, and you're going from Gus Bradley to Lou Anarumo, who I think is going to be a really big upgrade as well. So, yeah, I mean, look, the NFL, you can't always just do that comparison from year to year because things happen in year to year, from injuries to bad bounces that go that way. So you can never just assume that growth is coming. But I think on paper, which is what we're doing with this exercise, I think this team got a lot better going into this year.
When we come back on the show, we're going to begin to wrap up our preseason positional group previews with one of the seemingly more stable positions on the team. That's next. Back for a final time here on the Colts Squad Show, Locked On Colts Network. Thanks so much for tuning us in alongside Alan Pinkett, former NFLer and Notre Dame legend, and Zach Hicks of the Locked On Colts podcast. I'm Derek Schultz. Guys, you know what? Out of this is what 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know how many Colts Squad. We've done a full month of Colts Squad shows, so we made it a month, right? I feel like the position that we have spent the absolute least time on is running back, and maybe that's a good thing because you feel like, hey, it's Jonathan Taylor. It's Tyler Goodson's been in the program for the last couple of years. People really like Giddens. The draft pick out of Kansas State as well. So, maybe it's a good thing that we haven't spent a lot of time on the running back room. But overall, I mean, Alan, you're the running back. You're the expert when it comes to this. We'll start with you. What do you think about this group?
I like the group. I think it's a very solid group. And, starting with Jonathan Taylor, I was, before I got the gig, I knew Jonathan Taylor was one of the studs running the football, 1,400 yards. And that's an accomplishment. But then, I dug a little bit deeper. He did that within 14 games. Yeah. So, I mean, he's a stud. And when you look at him, sometimes you can look at a running back and know, oh, yeah, he can tote that rock, for all 17 games. He's just built in a way because you look at the running back position, a full-time running back, longevity-wise, it's about 6 years. And if you're going to run the ball that much, you got about 6 years. Well, he still looks fresh in this year 5, so who knows how long he can go. And then I think all 3 running backs, come from competent running schools. Iowa for Tyler Goodson, and then DJ Giddens coming from Kansas State. Those are schools that major in running the football. And what's nice is you've got guys in the backfield that are used to being that bell cow, that are used to running the football, used to being the man. I had that situation in Houston. Had Mike Rozier, who was a Heisman Trophy winner, had Alonzo Highsmith, who he came in after me, but he was a big old fullback who ran like a tailback. Had Lorenzo White, who was a finalist for the Heisman, and me. And all of us were used to running the ball 20, 30 times a game, and we couldn't do it in the NFL. The one thing I'll say is we had a great relationship. All the guys, I know I'm diverting a little bit, but all those guys used to come over to my house because I was the only married guy, and we'd eat dinner every Thursday, and we would have a competition, friendly competition that it wasn't the amount of yards, but whoever had the longest run, we put like $20 in the pot, and whoever had the longest run in the game would collect the money. And that's back when $20. I'm sure they put a C note in the pile now. But I used to always win that mess, because I would benefit from Alonzo and Mike Rozier just beating up the other defense. And then I was the fastest, so I came in and ran by all of them. But sorry to stray off, but it looks to me like it's excellent depth. You've got the style of runner, guys that can be battering rams, but then have the ability to break tackles, to have some speed, breakaway speed. You're getting the full package in all these three running backs, and you know that Jonathan Taylor is going to get the bulk of the carries. So it's incumbent upon the other running backs to take mental reps and know that when they get the opportunity, you got to make the most of it. I used to always think that for a running back to get acclimated into a game, need about 10 carries. You're going to miss a read on a couple of them. You're going to get the piss knocked out of you on a couple of them. And finally by that 10th carry, it's like, okay, I got the speed of the defense now. Okay, I see what the offensive line is doing, and I can mesh my speed with their speed. But when you're a backup, you got to mesh on carry one. So it's tougher on the backups, but that is what it is, and that's, I think, how I was able to have success. I would go through and take the mental reps and also do visualization. So when a guy flashed in front of me, I've already seen it, in my visualization, and I already did the mental rep to know that, okay, I'm just going to step on the side this way, so it's a good room. I wish for two things, that they could have one more. Three doesn't seem like enough. Wish they could have one more, and I wish they had a fullback. I'm even more impressed with Jonathan Taylor getting 1,400 yards with no fullback.
Yeah, I miss the days of fullbacks too, Alan. They were my favorite part of football, just seeing what fullbacks do out there. But Shane Steichen in this offense, they love to spread it out. They love to be in the shotgun for 98% of the snaps throughout the season, outside of QB sneaks and kneel downs. So unfortunately, no place for fullback outside of the couple Tyler Warren snaps we'll see at fullback this year, which would be really fun to see. But looking at this running back room, I do like it from top to bottom. Jonathan Taylor's your bell cow, your guy that I really want to talk about him in detail here in a second. But DJ Giddens, a really good change of pace back. I think, you get those young legs in there, really nice jump cut that he has there. And I think he showed a lot in the preseason with his pass blocking and with his receiving. So I think that could be a good thing for him in this upcoming season. And Tyler Goodson, just the consummate professional, says the right things, does the right things, does the special teams, does the, average over 5 yards a carry as a runner in his career as well. We're not talking enough about that because he had that gaffe a couple years ago. But yeah, I think he's going to be a really good player for them when he gets back from his injury. But one thing I really want to talk about with Jonathan Taylor is he's a player like me that keeps aging like a fine wine, even as the injuries pile up. And he's just very different, though, from the running back he was when he came out. He was this 215, 220 pound 4-3 runner who, if you gave him a little bit of space, he was gone. He was this insanely explosive player. And like Alan said, running backs have a shelf life of like 6 years. And with him now being in year 5, dealing with some injuries the last couple years, he's not really that same guy. Like he can still turn on the burners when he has to, but it's not like what we saw in his first 2 or 3 years with the Colts. But now what we have with this player is this hyper-productive guy who, like, I think this is the most important aspect of playing running back, is blocking the unblocked defender, using your patience and using your vision to run defenders who are not blocked into mesh points, running them into traffic so you can have more space as a runner. Because that's the most important. But you could have the most perfect run call, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have 11 blockers for the 11 players on defense. You need to take accountability as a running back for that extra player, for extra 2 players, because your quarterback's not getting in front of you to throw a block. So you have to take accountability for those extra 2 players. And what you do as a running back is so vital in terms of making that guy miss or making that player think the hole is to the right when you're going to the left. And I think with Jonathan Taylor, what we've seen the last couple of years is this guy who just excels with the patience, excels with the, I'm going to press this B gap really, really tight, and then I'm going to jump out to outside the run. And that linebacker is going to crash. He's going to run into my guard who's already blocking a nose tackle, and he's going to be out of the picture while I get around the outside. That's what's made Jonathan Taylor just age so well, is he's gone from this, give me 1 inch of space and I'm going to score on you, to now this player where, if my line blocks for 2 yards, I'm going to get 5. I'm going to get 6. And that is so insanely valuable as a running back because it creates more positive plays. And Taylor even mentioned earlier in camp that his goal this year is to make, fewer negative plays, make those plays that are 1 yard losses, 0 yard gains into 2, 3, 4 yard gains. And I'm like, man, if you're trying to already do more than that, you're already excelling at that. So I think he just gets it as a running back. I think he's just been a really smart player the last couple of years. And I just love watching his film because, again, the way that he presses gaps, the way that he uses his vision and his ability to block those unblocked defenders makes him, the top 5 running back he's been the last couple of years in the NFL.
That's the thing that I'm sorry, but that's the thing that kind of sucks about the shelf life, because you get to that 6th, 7th year, you've got that knowledge you were talking about, where you never want to predetermine where you're going to run, but you got enough knowledge to set a guy up,
Yep.
and you're going to fake his ass out. You know where he's coming from, and you've already planned the spin move you're going to make on him because he's going to be running out of control. You're just going to let him run right on by. But I always try to attack the running back position. Get 5 yards first. Do all the fundamental things to get 5 yards first, then bust it. So a lot of times you think, okay, I just want to just bust it for 40. No, you got to do the things that allow you to get to 5 yards first, then bust it. I think that's what made Emmitt Smith such a great running back, because he always made the right move when he got on the second level of the defense. Of course, he had a good enough O-line where he knew he was going to have the hole, but he knew where the people were on the second level, so he could anticipate what type of move he was going to make. The longer you play, you get a sense of that kind of stuff. So happy to see Jonathan Taylor, reach that level of smartness where he can really shine as a running back. And, like the way he's built up his body, because you're going to get hit all the time. So you actually have to pad your body to take all the hits. And all of them aren't, straightaway hits. I got a ton of glancing blows. I probably, in all the years I played football, probably got the stuffing knocked out of me 6 times. They were all my fault because I didn't see the dude. But most running backs, a lot of times when they know they're going to get hit, they can just turn their shoulders just a little bit, and they get a lot of glancing blows. So that's another way to, elongate your stay in the NFL, is not taking unnecessary punishment, but you build your body up and then anticipate and don't take the brunt of the collision all the time.
Well, it's cool to see Jonathan Taylor kind of turn into NBA guys do this, the true great ones, where they're relying on their athleticism early, and then they get older and they get smarter, and it almost becomes even more diabolical. Like Chris Paul can just get out there and completely outsmart you now because he can't rely on the stuff that he relied on when he was 25 years old.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love watching that kind of come to fruition. But important to mention here too, even though there are only 3 on the active roster, they did keep Ulysses Bentley IV and Khalil Herbert on the practice squad too. So that is something that they can take advantage. I know those are 2 guys that they liked, and Zach, you spoke highly of Ulysses Bentley IV as well, and the way that he performed in training camp and in the offseason. So something to keep an eye on in case that knock on wood, but it's a running back position, right? So there are going to be bumps and bruises along the way. Thanks so much for joining us. Another edition of the Colts Squad Show in the books. Again, we're going to have the game recaps following each and every Colts game this season for you right here on the Locked On Colts Network. But without games for the next couple of weeks, we'll still keep this Wednesday, Sunday cadence going. So Sunday night, I know there's no game. That's okay. 9 p.m. show. We're going to be talking Colts football right here on the Colts Squad Show. So be sure to tune in then. So our next show, 9 o'clock Sunday night. But until then, follow us on socials and at Locked On Colts. And we will see you next time right here on the Colts Squad Show.